Hi, welcome to TTOG. We're your hosts, Sarah and Annmarie.
This podcast is not a replacement for therapy. We are therapists. However, we are not providing free therapy. Welcome back to TTOG. I'm your host, Annmarie.
And I'm Sarah.
And on today's episode, we are going to be talking about
mental and emotional triggers.
This is going to be interesting.
Yeah, this is going to be, I feel like, a loaded episode because there's a lot that comes with everyone's triggers are different because everyone's brains are different. So I feel like this is going to be a very loaded episode. So trigger warning.
Yeah, so if you feel like this is going to, or eventually gets to the point where, oh gosh, I can't watch this episode anymore, please feel free.
Skip,
come again,
pause, and come back. Skip the episode as a whole, whatever you need.
No hard feelings over here.
Yeah. So I guess where we can start is by defining what a trigger is. Do you want to do your own version or do you want me to read my version?
Let's do your version first and then we can play off that.
So a mental trigger is either a stimuli or event that kind of correlates a strong negative emotion or emotional response for an individual or to an individual. So I guess breaking that down, it is anything that bothers you or your brain and warrants a negative response like anger, anxiety, panic, sadness,
overwhelm, etc. Yes. I think that when you think about a trigger, it is the sense of, in any other conversation, my emotions are extra heightened. To the point of, okay, this doesn't feel like a natural response for me.
Right.
This feels like something way more.
Right.
It's almost like when you have anxiety and then you experience panic after.
Right.
There's a very clear distinction. So you would understand, okay, here I was angry, right? Someone said something to me and I might have responded angrily. Or someone said something and I was like, oh, maybe I have no words, or I became like really numb, or my whole body flooded with like my negative, body's boiling, right? That would be trigger.
Right. So there's two categories or types of triggers. There's external triggers and then there's internal triggers. Your external triggers are like, well, they could be specific like sights, sounds, smells, certain situations or environments that you're subjected to, certain interactions with others, stressful life events, or the loss of a job or transition in life. Those would be your external things that are kind of on the outside causing those emotional or negative feelings on the inside.
Yeah, and I almost articulate that in my head as something external really hit my senses, my five senses. So whether I heard it right through my ears or whether there are sometimes that stimuli, like you have that same similar smell, and it's that ignites trauma, ignites the memory network, and then boom, we are now triggered. It might not be the exact same experience, but it is boom.
Right.
And
so kind of like I'm using this as an example because I feel like this is the most prominent amongst like social media and stuff like that, but kind of like when you get out of a toxic friendship or a toxic relationship and there were certain triggers that were happening that kind of made you overthink or fight or flight or panic, anxiety, whatever the case may be. And then you start a new relationship or gain a new friendship and everything's going great. You're like, oh my God, this is great. And then something that might not even be related
Yes.
to them being the same as that previous toxic person, but they did something that kind of triggered your senses to be like, okay, well, when I was with so and so, they did that and that meant they were cheating, or they
Exactly.
did that and that meant they were lying, or they did that and I knew that they were going to get really angry and then it was going to be that verbal or physical like abuse,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah, and I think the trigger, when we utilize that word, I think it's important to understand that that's really just telling yourself or others that I need to think more in depth about what is happening to me,
Right.
whether inside of me or whether in the experience that we're having at
Right.
that very moment.
Right.
That, you know, it's not a, oh my gosh, I'm triggered, so stop doing that forever and ever.
Right.
That just means, hey, I'm waving the flag of like, I'm not okay, maybe.
Right. And that kind of goes into the piece of it being a mental trigger, because
Yes.
the most important piece of a mental trigger is there's two, I don't want to say symptoms, but there's two options usually people go down when it's a mental trigger per se. They either shut down or they act irrational, which is not, I don't want to say that that's like not warranted or like a negative thing, because obviously it's a trigger for that person, but there's usually one extreme to the next.
Yeah.
And I think that that's where, which we'll touch later on in the episode about how to kind of cope with those triggers and de-escalate them in our brain.
Yeah. Conflict resolution in our own brain.
Right.
And with the externals.
Right. So then switching gears with the internal triggers, those could be thoughts or emotions related or associated around trauma experiences, which is the most common, I feel like. Negative emotions, so like I was saying, anger, anxiety, fear, all of those negative, I hate putting that word negative because those are still emotions, you know? But those negative emotions are internal, obviously, and then also substance use, which I thought was very unique.
Yeah.
Because obviously people can kind of correlate that to be external, but in reality, you're doing it to yourself. You're putting that into you, and it's an internal thing. So I know we talked about, when did we talk about this? A few days ago, I think, our personal talk, we were talking about how alcohol is a depressant and how that is an internal trigger. Like, okay, the alcohol might be an external thing, but you're consuming it, and it turns into an internal feeling.
Right. And that's what's funny, because initially it's such a high because you're like having fun and like all these things until you get to that point.
Right.
And then it becomes that depressant for you. So it's so important, and that's why to know what your trigger is, right, or triggers that you might have experienced in your life, it's important to be able to know yourself enough to know, okay, this emotion that I was feeling was not one of normalcy for me, right? I went above and beyond. I went to the max, like 0 to 100 in the quickness.
Right.
And I do, with a trigger, it's so used as like, oh my gosh, she has a trigger, or oh my god,
right, or oh my god, stop, you're triggering
right,
me.
you're triggering me, right? It's so frustrating.
It is because we can talk about this endlessly, and there's still going to be those people that kind of side note. There's also the piece of people that when you're genuinely saying you are triggering me, or that's triggering me, they are literally like, stop being dramatic, or like literally shut up. And that's another very important piece nowadays, because like, no, I know that term is used overly and like way too much, but I'm using it with sincerity. So I guess it's just a piece of who and where you're talking, or who and when and where you're talking. And that goes back to the previous episode on boundaries. So if you haven't listened to that, go back to that one. But yeah, I mean, there's a lot of things that can correlate to those mental triggers. I feel like.
And when someone says it, I think it's very important too that why do we need to tell people, explain to me why that's a trigger for you?
Right.
Really?
Just like the boundary thing. Like when we say, usually the people that are being like extra and are triggering you are the same people that don't need a fucking explanation. They know exactly what they're doing. They're doing that either A, because they don't give a fuck, or B, because they genuinely just don't care.
Yeah.
And that's the piece of when and where and who you're talking to. Because unfortunately, I feel like it's very situational, especially with the people that understand the mental health piece.
Yeah.
Which, okay, it's getting better in 2025. Is it getting better or overly sensible?
And saturated. Anybody and everybody can Google all of the things, but that doesn't mean that is true for you in every single case.
Because if it were, we would Google instead of going to school.
Yeah, you wouldn't need anyone.
You wouldn't need any
You wouldn't
provider.
need to go to school. You wouldn't need a doctor. You would be able to, give medication to yourself and all of those things. And I think if we stop asking people always of tell me why that's triggering, why can't we just be nice and say, okay.
Right.
Is it that hard?
It is.
Why though? I really don't understand it.
Me neither.
I don't understand why I have to justify why that experience, why what's going on inside of myself is so beyond you that you can't just say and be a reasonable human.
Right.
And just say, okay, next topic.
Right.
It has to be a fight or it has to be that big of a conversation is infuriating.
Right. And that brings me back to the first point of I hate this excuse, but it's a reason. Everyone's brains are wired differently.
Yes.
And unfortunately, that's kind of the piece that we have to look at is not only as the person that's saying they're triggered, but the person that's warranting a fight is, okay, my brain is different than yours. I understand that you're triggered. I don't understand why, but I don't need to understand why.
Right,
and then the person that is triggered, okay, this is making me more triggered. They're never going to understand why. Yes. I need to just walk away so I'm less triggered and I'm lowering those negative heightened emotions.
Agree to disagree.
Right.
Like, why can't we do that?
It's America.
It's human nature. Is that how we're wired though? Are we wired to just argue?
I think it's not the piece of argument or being argumentative. I think it's the piece of we are wired to always be in defense mode because those same people, not everyone, but those same people that are in defense mode are the same people that have their own trauma and their own triggers, but haven't really assessed them on a deeper level. So they just go into defense mode. And I know that I do that occasionally. I am the
human.
Right. But I also am sitting here saying that I do that.
Correct.
And I also sit here saying that I do X, Y, and Z to lower how much or how frequent that behavior is happening. So those are mental triggers. We're going to shift gears.
Okay.
And talk a little bit about emotional triggers.
Oh boy.
Yeah. I have a lot of those.
You do?
Emotional triggers. So an emotional trigger, the same thing with like that stimuli and things like that reaction. But what an emotional trigger is heightened levels of, again, anger, fear, sadness, anxiety, those emotions that people like to label as negative, which we are going to preface they are not negative.
Yeah.
Physical signs. increased heart rate, sweating, trembling, that kind of those panic symptoms. Like if you have experienced a panic attack or anxiety attack, all of the above. If you haven't, good for you. Because
congratulations.
Fight, flight, or freeze response, being hypervigilant, cognitive distortions, and brain fog, which is very prominent, I feel like, in those emotional triggers, because these can look very different than the mental because they don't present themselves in that way.
Yes.
Being impulsive, withdrawal or avoidance, and then emotional flashbacks. So those are kind of all of the what are or examples of emotional triggers, which I'm going to make a statement that might be a hot take, but
do it up.
I feel like these can be worse because of the symptoms, because of the physical factor. And I have to say that I would rather be dealing with a mental trigger because I can take myself out of it. Now, when I say mental, it's not all in the brain, but mental trigger as in like our experiences. Emotional being, it's hard to regulate our emotions.
There you
especially when we're in those negative heightened states.
Right.
So I believe that I would rather have more mental triggers than emotional, because being someone that has struggled with panic, no. I'm good with that. Thank you. Give it to the next person.
On to the next one.
No, thank you.
I think the panic and those emotional, physical symptoms, they definitely play hand in hand, and they can heighten and also lower, right? There's a piece of the emotional states of both things can be true at this exact same time, right? We can absolutely have these emotions that might be heightened, but we also know that we're okay.
Right.
At the exact same time. We can be triggered and still be okay.
Agree.
We can be triggered and still be okay. We can go out and go to Target and buy all the things and still be okay.
Right. It's that uncomfortable piece.
Correct.
That it gets overused, but it is that uncomfortable piece where we're uncomfortable at the doctor's office, but we still have to go and we still manage.
Yes.
We might be uncomfortable talking about a raise to our boss, but that's not it's not
happening.
That's not what I meant. No, but seriously,
triggered.
But that's a very uncomfortable situation, but we know that if we deserve something, we're still going to do it, right? And that's kind of the piece of, yeah, it's uncomfortable, and yeah, their response could trigger me more.
But the reason why we do it and the reason why we say it is for us to acknowledge that this is what's happening.
Right.
And that builds confidence.
And we won't, and that's the piece too.
Oh
is
my
we
goodness.
will never excel past the triggers if we don't put ourselves in it. Like, I know that sounds backhanded, but we have to, people don't realize that you can't excel or overcome unless you are constantly putting yourself back in it and acknowledging how you get out of it.
Right. It's like you are never going to push past that being comfy.
Right.
Where you are.
Right.
When people say get outside that comfort zone
or get used to being
uncomfortable,
right.
It's not I want you to be uncomfy all the time,
right.
or in every single situation. Please put yourself in that uncomfy space.
Right.
No, not at all.
Exactly. Even if you're putting yourself in that uncomfortable position while you're in therapy, or when you're with your friends, or when you have that supportive person that, okay, I know I'm going to be doing this uncomfortable thing, but I know that supportive person's right next to me. So if I need that, I have it.
Exactly. And that goes hand in hand with, we have to know when we're doing these things.
Right.
When we're vocalizing, in what situations, and analyzing it. at the end of the day, we have to be able to reflect our own actions.
Right.
That's what's important. Our thoughts, feelings, actions, reactions. And then I put the Annmarie one in there of a reflection. You
Right.
have to be able to reflect on what we just did to be able to do something different.
Right. I agree. Agreed. So, going off of that, why we get emotional triggers, or why we get emotionally triggered, I should say. As human beings, we have a survival mechanism. It's kind of the piece of that fight, flight, or freeze technique, not technique, but like mode that we go into. We are always, again, going to exhibit those certain traits. That's just how we are ran as humans. Now,
how often that happens is very different.
Right.
And
because we can't be in survival mode 24/7. It's just not a rational or logical thought when it comes to getting out of your trigger mode. You know, like, okay, again, that uncomfortable piece. We're not saying be uncomfortable 24/7, so there's no reason for you to constantly be in that survival mode, right?
And it's sometimes the same thing as anxiety or panic. It can come on very quickly.
Right.
But assuming or denying that we ever are in fight or flight mode is beyond me.
Right.
And it's, too, an interesting fact of how I describe it to some clients now, you know, that might not understand what fight, flight, freeze really is or what that experience looks like. It's like if there's a fire and you pull the fire alarm, your body is literally your brain is sending your body
neurotransmitters.
Like, you can't go anywhere. You have to assess the situation. Am I in danger or am I not in danger? Right. That is what your internal fire alarm is doing for yourself.
Right.
That's what fight or flight mode is supposed to be used for.
Well, right. And then there's also that piece of there's going to be those three. This is how I like to explain it to like the kids, I guess. There will always be three different people or friends that you have. There's going to be the one that immediately wants to run outside and play without looking.
Yep.
There's going to be the one that freezes because they don't know if they want to go outside or they want a snack. And then there's going to be...
I want the snack.
Right. And then there's going to be that third person where they're kind of pulling both ends.
Questioning.
Right. And they're kind of trying to pull both friends and doing that fighting response. And it gets a little easier because then they're like, oh, yeah, like, I know that happens because I see it happen. Yep. But seriously, like there's going to be those three people. Obviously, going back to your example, we know as humans, if there's a fire, get out of the building. But then there's also that piece of, oh my God, is there really actually a fire right now? Like, and you're stuck in that state of like frozen.
Right. Because in general, what are we doing? We are leaving. We are leaving. 9 times out of 10, people are leaving uncomfortable situations.
Right. And if you're staying there, that's another piece of when you need to assess because you shouldn't be staying in that uncomfortable position that long to make it
correct
a prolonged negative response.
Right, because that becomes then a different
scenario. It becomes unsafe now. Yeah. And not only like someone's putting you in an unsafe place, you're putting yourself in that unsafe place of having those constant negative feelings. That's debilitating your everyday life or your routine.
And it's hard to then decipher what emotion is actually coming through at that moment. Is it really fear? Is it anxiety? Am I just uncomfy? Is this just a new scenario that I don't know what's going to happen next? Like, it becomes so confusing at that moment because all of the emotions, and we stayed in that event way too long.
Right. The next one of the why is memory consolidation or flooding.
Oh, that happens.
Yeah, so I feel like...
This is definitely more therapeutic. Like, I don't think a lot of individuals know what flooding is.
No, but if you just think simple terms, memory overflow.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's how I kind of like to say it, because again, I'm not going to use the term flooding to
Mm-hmm.
a 10-year-old.
There's a tsunami.
Right. Like an overflow of moments or memories. Like that's in simpler terms. Like you just get so you're thinking about all three options, fight, flight, freeze,
Mm-hmm.
and then it gets overwhelming.
Yeah.
That's kind of like
It goes on
obviously
repeat.
we see two different populations,
Yeah.
so our terms are going to be different.
Yeah. It does, and it goes on repeat.
Right. Right. And then the last one is, which is another therapeutic thing, conditioning and a trauma response. So, and that's going to be in a different episode, all about trauma and stuff like that. But simple terms, trauma.
Hard to understand.
Right. So that's the why. So the how, we're going to switch gears here and talk about like how to kind of get out of those triggers. I'm going to list them and then we'll go through them.
Okay.
So recognize and identify triggers, practice self-awareness, seek help, practice self-care and self-compassion, relaxation techniques, creating a safe space, and voicing your needs, which
that's number one.
Are all right. And they're all, so starting from the top, recognizing and identifying triggers, like we just said, putting yourself in those uncomfortable positions to recognize and identify what about that triggers you.
Mm-hmm. And trying.
Right. Practicing self-awareness.
Yeah.
Kind of the same type of thing, like being aware of where you are, who you're with, when this happens. Like, honestly,
not automatically saying no, or I can't do this, or this is going to be too much.
This is triggering.
Right.
Okay, no, because this as a whole is not triggering. Mm-hmm. There could be, like we said earlier, the scenarios, the environments, sight, sound, smell. Those could be triggering, but this as a whole isn't triggering. Like, okay, when you're in therapy with a new client, they could be uncomfortable. Yes. Something you said could be triggering to them, but it's not making that session as a whole triggering.
Yes.
So seeking help, obviously, by us, not us as individuals, but
the therapists,
people like us.
Yeah, the helpers. Right.
Practice self-care and self-compassion. We have an episode all about self-care, so go there. No explanation needed. Relaxation techniques. Obviously, we're not going to get into it because this isn't therapy per se. This is just...
And everybody relaxes
differently.
So differently.
And, okay, let me just touch on this really quick since this is a thing. I don't care what anybody does on their free time, but going back to that internal substance use, be so careful. I say this from experience. Be so careful if you do smoke recreational, because that can make you triggered as fuck. You know, like those can make that, doing that can make these so much worse. Like, I get the piece of like, they could bring it down and relax you, but they
also can do the same.
Yeah, and they tend to do that more.
Right. For you.
So that's just a disclaimer, I guess.
Disclaimer. That was a good one.
Right. Creating a safe space. So however that may look to you individually, again, that can look different to everybody. My safe space is definitely my four walls in my room and who I allow in and out of that. You know, like obviously my dog is in there.
He's always allowed.
Right, always allowed. And then some humans. You know? Some humans. If you've seen my room, you're lucky. Like
I love that. And you can utilize your safe place in knowing what that feels like when you feel even triggered. Right. That's, you know, sometimes I utilize that for individuals that might get triggered in the external when they're out in the world, to remember what that safe place, very clear, very distinct place, what that looks like. And a lot of times people do feel safe when they're in their beds just hanging. And when you utilize that, when you really remember that, you can get a really good heartfelt sense of that. And your body is then going to acclimate accordingly.
Right. And that goes back to voicing your needs, kind of.
Yes.
I think that's the first thing that we touched on when we started this episode is saying without care of how it's going to offend somebody. This is how I feel.
Unapologetically.
Right. And it goes back to, again, our last episode. If you haven't listened to that one, I really advise you, if you're struggling with voicing your needs or your opinions regarding yourself, not any other topic, watch last week's episode and this one because it's very informational.
Boundaries, yeah.
Right. The last 3 are kind of my advices, I guess.
All right.
Call someone, keep a journal, and exercise. And when I say exercise, I am not being that annoying gym person because I don't really love the gym, but find something you love to do. Yeah. That can be walking your dog. That can be, like, I love Pilates. Love it. I love boxing. There's so many different ways to exercise, like yoga, anything to kind of just get. It is proven that the more you exercise, the more free and open space you have in your brain.
It allows you to be in more information brain, which is the left side of your brain.
With things that you may want or need or to implement in your life.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
Okay. So for the last 10-ish minutes, I want to talk about our triggers. I have a list, as usual.
I am clearly not prepared, so we're going to be on the spot.
That's okay.
For me.
I can talk about mine first while you brainstorm.
Okay.
So mine are all over the place, I guess. Like emotional, mental, physical, whatever. The one thing that triggers me, which probably has nothing to do with any trauma response, is just super loud noises. And it's not one loud noise. It's when there's multiple different loud noises. And that was in my older age. I was never like this. Like, I don't know. If I hear like multiple blow dryers going at a time or multiple songs, I'm like, oh my gosh.
System overload.
Yes. Like, I'm overstimulated. No routine. This is my OCD speaking. But like, seriously, if there's no routine or like we have a plan and the plan is going off the rails, why did we create a plan just to take the left turn? I don't understand.
The left.
I'm getting triggered talking about it. I'm touching the microphone.
Hard left.
Okay. Anyway, anxiety. That's my emotional one. I know that if I start getting anxiety and I don't do all of my techniques and tools to pull myself out of that panic's coming next. And that triggers me because I used to have horrible panic attacks when I was younger, to the point where I literally thought they were heart attacks, and I don't want those anymore.
Yeah, so those are not fun.
Yeah, so that's one. A messy work area.
Valid.
Yeah, can't do it. Like, overstimulated again, get triggered with all of the things going on in the desk or stuff like that, whatever. This goes hand in hand, being unorganized. I can be unorganized, but my unorganized is organized to my OCD brain. Because I know it might look unorganized to you, but I know where everything is.
Yeah.
So even if I say, oh my God, I'm so unorganized, that means that things are just out of place from where they're supposed to be set and how they're supposed to be set. I'm gonna sound crazy.
You're not crazy.
And then my last one, and the most important one, is being called a bitch. And this isn't really towards girls, but it's like men. Like, who gave you permission to use that word?
Right.
Another female?
Yeah. Because
I don't think so. Because as a man, you should not be using that word. Sorry. Especially towards a woman. My whole body just boils. All the blood just boils.
All the blood boils.
Because, like, why? Like, you're a bitch for calling me a bitch. How about?
Real life.
Right. Like, ew. Pick a different word. So, yeah, those are
let me
mine.
recap what you wrote, and then I could go based off that, because my brain kind of isn't
Sounds
working.
good.
Okay, so loud noises, not so much. Overstimulated, absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
And that's just even in the last year. It's been really weird. Like we'll be in Sunday dinner and everybody will be talking at the exact same time, and I will literally be like, "Oh, I can't even think." Like my brain literally just shuts off. Thunderstorms.
Really?
I don't know.
I used
I
to
actually
be
I
like
do
that
know
when I was
why.
younger,
Yeah.
but now I think they're peaceful, but I still get scared.
Nope. I'm
Why?
not in for them.
Okay, trauma. I'm gonna go therapist mode. Tell me why that.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, when I was younger, so my room was in the front of our house and I had 3 pretty big windows, and there was one thunderstorm that woke me up and it was just lighting up my room so bad.
Oh, yeah.
And then
Your
from there
brain
I was scared.
correlates.
From there I was scared. I was like, what if it hits this huge tree that's in front of our yard and I am the one right in the front? And one time on vacation, it hit a tree and fell on the roof, but luckily didn't cave my room in.
Yeah, see, the brain is such a complex and understudied thing. Like, it's the most studied thing, but also so understudied because there's so many pieces. So I get that because I was scared of thunder. I'm still scared of thunder, but I don't know if anyone remembers in Buffalo, but we had an October storm.
Oh, yeah.
And the tree in our front yard fell.
Yeah.
And we lost power. My brother was just born. He was literally a newborn. He was born in October. So literally fresh.
Yeah.
Fresh little turkey. And my mom was so scared. So I kind of correlated that as, okay, my caretaker is scared. So if she's scared and she's my mom, then I need to be terrified.
Yeah.
You know, like, again, that's
Yeah.
how the brain
It's our
is,
brain.
right?
Yelling is a thing for me.
Is it?
Yeah. That one really.
Okay, you get triggered, or because I get what you're saying, but that makes me want to scream louder.
Yes. Both things. Both things are very true. Because I want my point across. Because I want you to shut the hell up now. Stop yelling at me. Because we can talk like normal humans. But as soon as it starts happening, I definitely am triggered as fuck. What other ones? I think.
I know one of yours. Can I say it?
Sure. You know one of mine? Because I say it?
I definitely know one of yours. I feel like one of yours is when somebody is super nice to your face.
Oh my good Lord.
And then almost immediately talking
I'm already
behind
there.
your back.
I'm already there.
Right.
It's.
Because, like, why? How old are we?
What?
Like,
What is the point?
Say it to me. Like, just say it to me.
I'm a grown adult. I can handle it. I promise. I have a full-blown issue.
Right.
But it is what it is. But you're right. People talking shit behind your back.
I think you get triggered by that, which again, not an excuse for other people to be shitty, but we get triggered from that because that's not how we would treat other people.
Correct.
So our brain shifts it to, why would someone treat me like that when I'm not treating them like that?
Right. And
which shifts again for the second time to everyone's brains are wired differently.
But do you know what usually happens? And then it triggers me again. It goes to, don't use therapy against me. Why are you saying that to me? Right? Like,
oh God, stop, because I hate that too. I hate when you're asking someone for a personal conversation and they get therapy and therapy-y. Like, I do that sometimes, but like not to an extent like, okay,
well, I get triggered.
Tell me about that thought.
Yeah.
Like,
well, I get triggered when I'm trying to tell someone that, hey, please stop yelling or please stop doing that. And then they say, oh, you're just saying that because, like, you're a therapist. I'm like, what in the world are you talking about? No, at the end of the day, I wake up with bad breath just like the rest of us. Just because I have a degree that says I'm a therapist does not mean that I don't have feelings.
No, you want to know what my favorite part is what's the diagnosis for a therapist? all of them.
The whole book.
If I want it.
Right.
Like, shut up.
We all can find
I don't
it.
even know what you're saying. Okay, anyway, clearly we're getting off topic and triggered.
All at the same time. We're not getting off topic. This is so very true.
So funny. That's hilarious.
What other ones?
Someone just told me that the other day. Okay, Miss Therapist, but still plays victim.
Wow. That's deep.
Right here.
Well, no one knows that on the microphone. She put the middle finger way up high.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
If they're not
If you're
watching
not
on
watching,
YouTube,
just picture my finger. No, that's going to be one of our reels. Tune in to this week's
one. Oh my God, that's so funny. Let's see. An emotional one. It probably is anxiety, but in relation,
I feel like it's anger too.
Yeah.
Regarding that yelling.
Yeah. Yeah.
You
both.
get triggered when people are fucking that angry
Yeah.
around you.
I'm like, I don't understand that. And then, because I would never get that, I don't think I would get that angry. Maybe I do. Who knows? But anxiety too, but it's in relation to my kids.
Right.
When they're sick, when they hurt, I'm like, oh my God, what are we going to do?
Right.
What can I do? Unorganized and or not having a plan also is one. This is probably why me and you get along so well.
Go into anxiety central. Hello, like
I know.
I can't do it because I don't have a plan. I feel very underprepared. I'm like, take a breath,
just breathe,
come back down.
Yeah,
touch the ground.
We can do it.
Go touch some grass.
Legitimately touch some grass. Yeah, but I think it just shows up. It shows up differently, for me in all of my roles in my life, I think. Work, definitely, I need a plan. I need to make sure all my ducks are in the row. I need to, at home, to also have a plan, but also have time to be able to relax. I have to plan to relax, to not get triggered, that I'm doing work. I think that's where my brain goes into overload.
I know another one.
For me?
Yeah.
Oh my God, you're coming at me.
When people talk over you or interrupt you.
You know what I noticed? That I do that to you all the time.
I'll sit back and you talk the whole time. I'm just here enjoying the ride. That's all. But like when people do that to you,
so glad.
It's so funny because you get so mad and I see it firsthand. And I have to try not to laugh because like you have to be centered.
We got to reel it in. Touch some grass. Again, touch the grass. But it's hard to touch the grass in those moments. And I think just for me too, to be able to dive into journaling is the best place that I could be, or being mindful, having gratitude. Those things are so important for me to know. Yes, these are actually very valid. They happen all the time, but they don't happen as intensely as they would when I was a kid or growing up or in my 20s or whenever that was.
Agreed.
So, yay.
Yay, that was our triggered episode.
Triggered as AF.
Yeah, she tries to be good on the podcast. Don't let her fool you though. She still swears. Anyway,
yeah, like a sailor.
That concludes this week's episode. We hope you enjoyed, and we'll see you next week.
Bye. Avoiding your triggers isn't healing. Healing happens when you're triggered and you're able to move through the pain, the pattern, the story, and walk your way to a different ending.